Welcome to the Confessions Podcast. I'm Cindy Wagman.
And I'm Jess Campbell. We're two former in-house nonprofit pros turned coaches and consultants to purpose-driven organizations.
After years of building up our separate six-figure businesses from scratch, we've thrown a lot of spaghetti at the wall and have lived to see what sticks.
We're on a mission to help other nonprofit coaches and consultants looking to start or scale their own businesses past the six-figure mark by pulling back the curtain.
Whether you're still working inside a nonprofit and thinking of one day going out on your own, or you've been running your consulting business for years, you understand that working with nonprofits is just different. We're giving you access to the business leaders who serve nonprofits as their clients. You know, the people who truly get it.
No more gatekeeping, no more secrets. This podcast is going to give you an inside look at what running a successful nonprofit coaching and consulting business looks like. Basically, we're asking people how much money they make, how they get paid, and what has and hasn't worked in their businesses.
Listen in as these leaders share their insights, their numbers, and the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to building a nonprofit coaching or consulting business. We're going to empower you to make the power moves that give you the income and freedom you set out to create from day one.
You ready? Let's go.
Hey, Jess.
Hi, Cindy. I'm so excited.
This is like you finding
this is my story brand.
Yeah. This is your story brand. We're diving into a conversation with my friend and colleague, Betty Xie, who is a multi-passionate person, just like you, Jess, and how she was able to combine some really unique and distinct things about her into a business. And Betty is so wise and thoughtful that I love everything she always says.
Totally. I mean, this is my first time meeting Betty, and I felt just so seen in this conversation and validated. And I think as someone who's a multi-passionate person, I am constantly from the external world feeling like I need to slim down and like put myself in a box and do less and conform, focus. And I'm like, it drives me nuts because nothing makes me want to like break out of that box more than the like society telling me I should. So this was really great to find another entrepreneur who, like me, is happy and thriving and running a successful business. So for anyone listening who might be in that camp, I think you're going to be like, punching up in the air like I was during the episode.
Yes. It's such a pleasure to welcome Betty to the podcast. So with that, I will introduce you all to Betty Xie.
Enjoy the convo.
Betty, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me here, Cindy and Jess. I'm so excited.
I'm obsessed with this conversation that we're going to have because many people have heard me say this before. Betty, you are one of the most talented people I know. And I think you've found a way to blend a lot of your talents into your business, which a lot of people struggle with. So can you start by just introducing yourself and telling us what do you do in your business? What are the multiple different awesome things that you do?
Yeah, so I do multiple different things that like sometimes when it comes off in one sentence, that sounds like, oh, that's an interesting combo. What I do is I have a background in the arts. So I'm a filmmaker. I'm also a fundraising consultant for small nonprofits. I serve a lot of like arts nonprofit, but not exclusive to arts nonprofits. And then during the pandemic, I also developed a one-on-one coaching program, career coaching for creators and artists. So similar to the two of you, I'm a consultant, but I also host a podcast. I host a podcast for people who are interested in new ways of looking at creative careers and practice because as you mentioned, Cindy, I'm a multi-passionate, and for a long time I was figuring out like what is the career setup that works for me. And now like I feel like I am like really passionate to share some of my insights and also like take other cool creatives on the podcast and share that.
That's so awesome. Can you tell us about the journey of how you figured out that you could create a space where it blended all of those things? Because I think, I mean, I know you, I know a little bit about your journey, and it went from like focus on one area, focus on another area, focus on another area, and it kind of cycled through until you found the space where they all blend together. So how was that?
Yeah. So when I was like, so I went to film studies for school, so arts degree. So when I came out, like many other people who have an arts degree, we just kind of like work in the arts organizations. That was the most intuitive thing. I was making films, or I wasn't making any money like many people. And then I became an accidental fundraiser, as in like the arts organization needed people to fundraise. And I didn't mind numbers. But as you can imagine, that those early phase was like kind of like trial and error. Okay, I can do this, I can do that. It feels like a story of many people share. One thing that I always felt like almost like FOMO about is like people always say like, well, you got to focus. Like whether you hear that in like everything, like you hear that in the arts especially, it's like you got to like give it all to this one path. And I just like always had a question mark in my mind because I was not really like, I am really passionate about filmmaking, but also like as I developed my fundraising careers, I really like working with organizations. And then there's a time that like, Cindy, you know, because you my fundraising mentor, we met like through a mentorship program. And I just like said, like I totally took a break from having a job and went back to school and learn about design thinking. And part of the reason why was like, I want to kind of see how things work. And like, at the time I thought it's about how things work for organizations, but really I took away how things work in general. Of like, oh, you can kind of design your own paths, not just for organization, but for your own self. So that's how I started building more confidence that like definitely there's a place for those of us who are interested in multiple different things. And then I ended up working with you, Cindy, at a group partnership. And I think that job as well, not to sing your praises too much, but like you being a really awesome boss who is like gave me a lot of flexibility to explore my own interests outside of the job. So gradually I was like, there is a space that you can like embrace the different faceted things. But funny enough, as I arrive here wearing the different hats, like if you look at what I do, it's still very connected to the arts. I'm very passionate about like being an artist and serve other creative people. So that partially is kind of the uniting factor. And I don't know how to do it in any other way. It's not like I found my niche. Like that's just what I'm passionate about. Yeah.
I am obsessed to have a fellow multi-passionate person to talk with, because I think we get a really bad rap, and so it feels so good to be in company with someone like me, because I also am what externally might look like I'm all over the place. To me, what you just said is I don't know a different way to be. I feel the exact same way. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about, for those other multi-passionate folks that are listening in, about how you pick and choose where to spend your time, especially as it relates to, you mentioned at the top of the call before we were even recording, hobbies versus things that generate revenue, right? There's only 24 hours in a day. I wish there were 48, there's not. So how do you pick and choose where you put your time and energy, and balance that with, surviving, paying yourself, all those things?
Yeah. It has been a lot of trial and error. With the business specifically, I think it also I think I'm lucky that before I went to become like self-employed, I did a lot of like those trial and errors of situations where I didn't like or I didn't thrive in. For instance, I knew that I wasn't there was a time in my career that people said oh, you could go work for a bigger organization and you could foreseeably become the ED of a arts organization one day. I did think about that for like a little while. And then I like was part of like a board for an organization I really love. And that kind of informed me that I was like, no, I cannot see myself. Like, this is really the honest truth. I cannot see myself thriving in that like structure where you're responsible for the structure. So even like I carry those trial and error and now into like practicing my own business and think about, well, my goal here, I know that I need to thrive in like being able to switch different interests. So I need to remain very agile. And part of that means like, as I grow, I'm not aiming to like build a company of like 5 or 10. I'm actually just like aiming to like be able to like, for other people, it might be like scaling, like or selling like things that's one to many. For me, it's like building long-term relationship with like some core clients. So that's how I kind of figure out as I go. Yeah.
I feel like this is hitting so hard for you, Jess, like resonating so hard.
I'm like double tap, like I'm like sending all the emojis everywhere, because I think for people who aren't like us, it's so frustrating to work with people like us because they're like, focus, focus. And I'm like, I would rather die. I would rather die. So stop trying to put me in a box,
Yeah.
you know? And so just to be with someone who gets it, I'm like, yeah.
And that's the phrase that I always think about. It's like, oh my God, I feel the box again. Like, people sometimes it's good intention, right? Yeah.
Totally. They think they're being helpful. And really, it's like, put a muzzle on.
Yeah.
So that brings me to one of my questions, which is, how do you manage your time and energy, right? How do you find the time or even structure your days? Is there structure to your days? I know you played around with this in the past. So how have you structured your energy and time so that you feel like you can do all those things?
I recently finally kind of found my own pattern, because I know there's like different people works for different things for them. For me, I still like to be like intentional in planning. So I plan 80% of my time and then I leave 20% for spontaneity. I think that's like the golden rule for myself. And it doesn't mean that like it's like exactly 80%, but like I like things to be planned, and then I like to break the rules a little. So it's about kind of like giving that like breathing room. Like I find that if a week is like all meetings, I'm like dying. And if it's all like writing, grant writing, report writing, I'm dying as well. So it has to have like a kind of like variety. And then I also recently started doing like block Friday off completely for creative time. Sometimes it doesn't mean that I'm actually doing anything. It just means I'm like zoning out. That's creative time too. That's like usually how I kind of like split my focus. But also like us, like we all are here, like we are very like high achieving, ambitious people with our like task list. I found that like for my sanity, recently I kind of developed this system at the beginning of the week. I look at like what's things that I need to like stretch myself this week. And it cannot be a list more than 3 things. And what are things that is like I'm autopiloting, and what's things that like what are the things that I'm like what I call receiving energy. Like I'm not doing anything. I'm just kind of waiting for something to happen. Because otherwise I would just like kind of be too hard on myself and say like, well, I still haven't worked on that thing. Like this is just practice has helped me to calm myself down. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I'm, again, just feeling affirmed because I found a very similar schedule works for me. Like I need some serious blank space. I take Fridays off to the best of my ability as well. Cannot have a whole full calendar of meetings. Nothing sounds worse. But what I want to ask you about next is this line between hobbies versus things you actually get paid for and make money. And when do you decide this can just be a hobby? This is just something I want to enjoy. This is for my creative outlet versus something like I need to turn this into a revenue stream or a business. because I find people like us think and act and just move at a very fast pace. And I'll just call myself out that I can find myself in a cycle of not doing things just for the pleasure of them, for the enjoyment of them. And that's not always like, not everything needs to be a business. So I'm just curious how you navigate that.
Yeah. I don't have like the perfect answer. Just share like what's like, I feel so seen by that question. Because like, especially for like passionate or creative people, you're so like, you love what you do. So like, where's the line? And I would give like my coaching, one-on-one coaching service as an example. Like, and I know you folks love numbers. So in like the time that I started, like around 1.5 years, I make like close to 20K in revenue, which is not like insignificant, but it's also like not the bulk of my income. And then during the like even this summer, I was like, maybe I need to like start looking at like how to expand it and like scale it. And I just find that like it's funny, the more that I think about like how to like increase it just for the money's sake, the slower the business go. I don't know whether you folks find that like you're nodding really hard. And so what I come to recognize is like I'm still trying to find that line basically of like how much am I doing this for like revenue generation and how much do I do it for like interest, because I truly really love the one-on-one coaching. So like right now, like as I'm like going off in December and take a break, that's a question that I like have for myself next year, what I'm going to do with that. Well, like still focus like making both my income from consulting. Yeah.
I want to come back to the December break because you just mentioned that, but we want to talk about that. But before we do, I want you to talk a little bit about business development, because I think what is so amazing about what you do is you found a really unique niche, an area that you stand out, right? No one is doing the things that you do and doing them together. And so what does that look like in terms of how you do business development, where you find clients, where are they coming to you from, and what does that look like?
So for the consulting things, I've been really lucky, and also really being part of the constellation of consultants of the group partnership has really helped. It's been entirely referral. And I think it is like what you said, Cindy, is that like I've been thinking why arts organization keep talking to me, because of like I've already been in the arts. They found that I do this now, and one thing after another is like referring has been very powerful. And I think also that works for my personality, because like as I said before, I'm not here to like scale very rapidly. Maybe like that would be like another 5 years, but like right now I'm just focusing on building those long-term relationships. And so that's that. For the coaching, when I started, I knew that like I had to push myself a little bit from my comfort zone, because I'm not like, even though like I'm a creative person, I'm not really like that comfortable. I was not very comfortable about putting myself out there. And I actually had a little bit of fear. I had a huge fear, not a little bit of fear, of the people who are in my film circle would think that I'm like trying to sell them something like snake oil or something. I don't know why that was the mindset, but that was what I was fearful the most, as I don't want to lose friends. I don't want people to have conversation with me and think that I'm teaching them coaching. So I actually enrolled myself. I knew very specifically I needed like content help. So I actually like hired somewhat of a marketing coach to work with me to like kind of like, I knew I could create, I had good content and good thoughts, but I don't know how to like work with those fear. So that was like one thing that was really helpful. And I ended up like now using a lot of like social media, like and truly one thing I learned is that people don't get confused. They don't get confused of like, wait a second, that person does this and they also do this because what ends up happening is they only like get zero in on the thing that they want you to help. For my coaching service, it's been like mostly through social media that people who know of me originally or know of me through like a second degree and third degree became my clients.
Hi, Betty. We're back with the next round of our rapid fire questions. Are you ready to play?
Yeah.
Okay. So on our episode, you talked about being a film lover, and I am curious, what is your favorite film of all time?
My favorite film of all time is, wow, I'm losing the English name, but I'm going to tell you the filmmaker's name, Edward Yang. He's a Taiwanese filmmaker. He has this film called Yi Yi. There's an English name, official English name for that, but it's won the Cannes Award. It's a really lovely film about family.
About family. Okay, I was like, what is it about? I know you love to travel. Where is next up on your big trip list?
Next up, I'm taking December off. So I'm going to Germany, India, and Japan.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Around the world for real. And then my last question is, what is your favorite way to practice self-care?
My favorite way to practice self-care right now is a mix of meditation in the morning. I always like to also lit a little candle to feel luxurious. And the other way is sometimes just going for a quick exercise, like a 15-minute cardio exercise.
Oh, you're so something to aspire to. Okay, Betty, thank you for playing. Can you tell us a little bit more about which social platforms you're on, what you've seen the most success? Because I know that they're vastly different if you're going to go from like the range of TikTok to say LinkedIn. So I'm curious, where do you like to play and how have you found showing up as your authentic self has, been the best ROI?
Instagram has been my main platform because of the, I actually think it has to do with the demographics I'm speaking to. Like a lot of like artists use Instagram. So, and then through Instagram, I realized that I have a lot of thoughts to share, and they've been like actually the most instrumental for my marketing, because like I don't think we're in the age that you can just like put out some beautiful posts and people would like talk to you. You kind of have to like, especially for coaching services, all about the trust that you build. So I try to build trust with my audience, and a lot of the clients or later people who come on my podcast say that they feel really seen from like my Instagram story where I share my own experience and my own thoughts on certain issues. And then later from that, I realized I'm a very verbose person. So I was like, I might as well do a podcast. So I've been using podcasts, and it has also worked well for me in terms of bringing one-on-one coaching clients. I have not done I've tried doing like more kind of TikTok style Instagram story video. It hasn't really like clicked in me how I would do that well. I also try to like keep it very like simple, because like again, like my mind just like gets like overwhelmed when I think about Facebook or like YouTube and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that I might not do that in the future, but so far it's been Instagram and podcast. But I would say this, and I'm sure you've to also notice, since the like kind of people coming back in person, the usage on social media is not as high. So I think that's a question for coaches and consultants in 2023 in terms of engagement.
So true. And for anyone who's not already following Betty, we're going to link her Instagram, because what I think you do so well there is you speak so directly to the audience. Like your wisdom and experience come through, and it builds up this authority that I think really opens those conversations up for you. So I've just been so impressed with your social content. And there's some fun things on there too. Like I love how you use polls and like ask people to guess fun facts about you. But I think really your experience shines on that platform. So let's come back to the taking December off. How did you arrive at that decision and how are you managing it?
So it was like combination of personal will and serendipity. Serendipity as in I do have a wedding to go to in India. That's why I'm traveling internationally. But when I was planning that trip, I could plan that trip for 2 weeks, but I was like, you know what? Let's make it like this like around the world trip. So I'm going to 3 countries around the world. Also, I was like kind of curious, not curious, but I was thinking like, what was the reason that I kind of chose like being self-employed and on this? Like it was because of flexibility. And so I think that in this first year of like fully being on my own, like I deserve to give myself a gift. So that's that. And I was curious how the clients would respond. So I talked to each and every one of them and no one had any kind of concern. That's also what I'm very grateful about. And I think that good practice to keep on practicing in the future years. Yeah.
I love that you arrived at that decision. And I was saying in the chat, like when you mentioned taking December off, because I too am trying to take December off. Mine's for a different reason. Mine is just because our brains are very busy. I mean, I think probably every woman specifically listening to this has very busy brains, but ours clink at a different pace. And I just know it's like sometimes you are gifted this wisdom as you age. And it's like, if I don't have some blank space to just dream and think and quiet the noise of all the obligations and the tasks and the to-do list, then I will not be rip-roared and ready to go come the new year. And so whether you do that through traveling, I plan on doing it through a whole bunch of like Netflix and chilling and, you know, just going at a different pace. Like, I think it's really important for anyone listening to make sure you carve out space to refuel that way. Because I think otherwise burnout's on the other side.
I totally agree.
Have you had burnout? Sorry to jump right in with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you realize it? Because I think it's confusing sometimes when you're used to being so busy and active.
The way that I experienced burnout was around the time that I was in school and working 2 jobs. Actually, Cindy, you probably know, it was right before like the pandemic happened. And there was like other mini burnout periods, but that was the one that was like most acute. And it's like exactly what you're describing, Jess. It's like, I thought that like you can just like, if like our life is a canvas, I thought that you can paint everything with color. It would be all wonderful, right? But like you actually need like, just like a painting, you actually need some negative space to breathe. Now that like kind of have experienced burnout and talk to other people about it, what I feel like what end up happening is like, if you are not careful, you get like a really bad burnout, and a bad burnout is really hard to climb back out. It's much better to have like mini burnout and like mini vacation. So we just need to I totally advocate of people like having like space, whether it's like a seasonal ones or like a big break. Yeah.
I want to ask you kind of along the same lines, but about hobbies, because you are someone who's been able to bring in some of your hobbies into your business. And I think part of that white space that we need is like quote unquote rest, like actually like sleeping properly and you know, those kinds of things. But sometimes it's also doing some other things. So how do you find space for hobbies, and how do you talked a little bit about, you know, building hobbies into your business, but I actually want to talk about kind of the opposite thing of like creating boundaries around your hobbies so that they just stay your hobbies and you just get that joy from doing that.
So there's like hobbies that it's like just for the fun of it. And then there's like what I call rituals that is like really good for the mind. So I meditate every morning. It's not negotiable. So it becomes like a habit. It's just, I don't like, that's why it's hard for me to answer. Like, how do I make space for it? Like, it just like, it's there. And for hobbies, I would admit, like hobbies comes and goes, different seasons. And I have to remind myself that not everything has to become like a habit. And because like one season I was very into painting, like during the pandemic, like this season, like this current season, I barely paint. Sometimes like hobbies like kind of bite you in the head and go like, oh, I haven't painted. I'm not being good, but wait a second. That was for fun. So I totally get like the question that you're asking is like, you have to kind of just also recognize that you can have many different hobbies. I learned is like, maybe have like some mini hobby that you can do for like 5 minutes, things that you can do for 1 hour. Cause like if I'm painting, that's like a 2 hour gone. I don't have 2 hours all the time. And sometimes it's like, and I learned this like from a show. I don't know, a comedian said this. There's no such thing as guilty pleasure. Every pressure is a pressure. Don't feel guilty about them.
I love that.
I love that too.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about this meditation? It's something that has been on my list to incorporate into my life for, the better part of the last decade. I'd be so curious did you just start? Did you learn from someone? Do you have an app you recommend? Like, tell us about meditation.
Yes, I actually have an app to recommend. I love that you two are really into details. It's like, I'm going to get very specific. Based on my research, the app that I like the most for people who are like initially hard to get into the habit is like this app called Balance. I think they offer first year for free because there is no like, I don't know about the audience here, but some of us are a little bit like against like people like, the mantra of like saying a lot of like spiritual things or woo-woo stuff in the meditation track. I'm like, I just need someone to facilitate me breathing. But if you're into more of the kind of mantra stuff, like I think there's an app called Insight. It's also totally free. And it's really good for meditation as well.
So helpful. Thank you.
I know.
Going to download those right away.
Like, right now, writing them down. Oh, because I struggle with quieting my mind too. Surprise,
like
surprise.
Cindy needs that at 3 a.m. when she wakes up in the middle of the night and needs to go back to bed.
I've actually tried that. So I've tried like listening to some sort of a like can't sleep meditation if I wake up in the middle of the night. It helps.
I love that. Like we are more like, I love meditation myself. I've met so many people that tell me that like, I feel bad that I can't get into meditation. And I really think that like meditation doesn't need to take the form of like you sitting down on a mat and like listen to a track for like 10, 20 minutes. Like for Cindy, I know you're like, I feel like running is your meditation.
Totally is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been listening to audiobooks, which is also so surprisingly meditative as well. So
I agree. Yeah.
I love that, making it accessible. Do it how like you want to do it. I love that.
Yeah. Don't feel guilty about like the not doing the self-care tricks out there. I just wanted to say that because lately that's come out a lot with like conversations, even with clients. It's like, are you feeling guilty because you're not doing the self-improvement stuff out there? I think that we are kind of like, it's a little bit of the side effect of like mental health and like self-improvement stuff have really taken on a wave in the last couple of years. Yeah.
I know as we kind of come to the end of this episode, one thing that I'm thinking about is you talked about at the top of our call, all the things that you do in your business. And as you look forward to the new year and in 2023, I'm just kind of wondering, this is my curiosity peaking, like, do you see those things staying? Do you think that you're going to add, reduce, like give us a peek into the future, Betty? Because I just want people to know that it's okay to change.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe you're not even changing, but I just want people, if anyone's listening, and if that is going to be your answer, like you can stay the same, you can change, like it's all good. I'm just curious about what your future might hold.
I feel like you stole my mind there. Like I've actually I change all the time and want to experiment different things. In 2023, I want to like try even more bringing the coaching aspect into the fundraising consulting. I've already started, but I think that like that skills that I've developed in coaching has been really conducive with the fundraising work, and I'm curious to do that. The other thing is for my coaching program, like I'm curious to serve more international clients. I'm kind of planting a seed for myself here because I've been so Canadian based. I recently started having like one client in Germany, for example, and I said, oh yeah, a lot of things is very connected. So that might be that I'm looking for more like speaking opportunity or that to like in the international space. I'm also kind of like on the edge of being ready of like kind of testing intimate group program for the one-on-one coaching. I might do it first iteration just for returning clients, but that's something that I'm excited about to test and see where it goes. Yeah.
I love that. And I mean, I think we all know the saying changes is a constant.
Mm-hmm.
And how, because so much of what you talked about, I think resonates with Jen, I just called you Jess. And, you know, I tend to be like super, super focused and, but for both types of business owners or consultants, I feel like all of us lean into that change and growth and evolution. And so I think that's so important to remember. Whatever your style is, that's a sign that we're learning, that we're growing. And I think that's so important. We need to wrap up this conversation. So Betty, where can our listeners connect with you and all your wisdom?
You can find me on my Instagram at Betty Xie Coach, or find me on LinkedIn just with my name. You can also, through my Instagram, you'll be able to find my podcast called the Everyday Talent Podcast.
Thank you so, so much for joining us. And it's also just an honor to have you in my life. You're awesome. Thanks so much, Betty.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you so much, Cindy and Jess. And yes, Jess, I feel like we have so much similarity. We should take this offline.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Jess, you have to come visit us in Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you again for listening to the Confessions podcast for nonprofit coaches and consultants. If you enjoyed today's episode, which I sure hope you did, you can show your support in one of three ways.
Number 1, post a screenshot of this episode to your Instagram stories or LinkedIn profile and tag Cindy and I so we can repost you.
Number 2, share this podcast with a fellow nonprofit coach or consultant.
And number 3, leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to grow and reach new listeners.
And of course, make sure you subscribe so you can get the latest and greatest interviews as they drop every Thursday.
And to our fellow nonprofit coaching and consulting friends, remember, we're an open book and here to answer your burning biz questions.
See you next time.